We'll come back onto it. So going live now. Oh, I think we're live, but I can't see our nice title card. What's going on? Oh, no, it's connecting. Hello, we're live. Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our penultimate interview of the series. And tonight we will be talking all about casting. But before we get going, do let us know where you're watching from and leave us a comment. And let us know if you've been out to the shops this week as well, especially in the UK. We know the shops have opened. So if you've been out shopping, let us know what you've been doing and what you've been getting. Just be quite nosy, really. It's just quite interesting to see. I haven't been to the shops myself yet. We'll see what happens. If you are joining us live, don't forget you can also comment with a question for this evening's guest. And if you're watching the recording, do let us know your favorite part of the interview. If you don't have a question, why not tag someone who you think is missing out or share. So with all that housekeeping done, I'm Henry from Cornwall Film Festival. And now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's guest, a casting director with over 20 years experience, having worked on shows such as North and South, Lip Service, The Musketeers, Merlin, Downton Abbey, Jamestown, Sanditon, and I believe we have quite a few Sanditon fans watching this evening from across the world, so hello to you all, and the recently BAFTA-nominated Save Me, and many more. Please welcome Jill Trevellick. I hope I said that right there, Jill.
You did.
Marvellous. Well, hello. Thank you for joining us. That's my introduction. Let's just get all the other. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. So let us jump straight in there, Jill.
Yeah, I was just thinking you should be able to say my name correctly because, of course, it's a Cornish name.
It is a Cornish name. Maybe we could talk. Oh, we have to talk a bit about that as well. We've got so much to talk about. It's all these things. So, hello, if you're watching from Cornwall. I don't know if it's a place. Do we know if it's a place? I don't know.
I don't think it is a place. I think it might have been once a very small farm.
Well, if anyone's watching and knows that, we've got people from Indiana, Somerset, the USA, Boston.
Yeah.
People saying hello, and everyone's happy we've got the Gremlins. So for those of you who did try and watch on Wednesday, it was raining and the Gremlins got wet. So if you've seen the film, you'll understand the reference. But we're here tonight with a backup laptop as well. But anyway, we digress, Jill. We digress. Yeah. Tell us about you. How did you become a casting director?
It wasn't really particularly planned. I mean, casting directors come from all kinds of backgrounds. Quite a lot have been actresses before, stage managers. I was not from a family who kind of encouraged me to go to the theatre even. But I loved literature, and I ended up in Liverpool doing an English degree, a university there. And while I was at university, I discovered theatre, and it was the Everyman Theatre at the time, which was a very, very cool place to be when I was at university. It's quite a long time ago now. And so I managed to get a job at the Everyman when it reopened. And so for the next 12 years, I worked in 3 different theatres. Liverpool Everyman, National Theatre, and the Young Vic. Always in admin, pub PR, that kind of role, yeah. And the last job I had was at the Young Vic, and that's when I worked with a director called David Thacker, and he encouraged me to be part of the creative team as well, really, so in a kind of producer role. So that's really when I started to get involved in casting and loved it. And once you've had a taste of working on the creative side of the industry, you can't really just step back. So I finally decided after 12 years that I would specialize in trying to be a casting director. And so for the next 3.5 years, I think, I was a casting assistant, worked with lots of different casting directors, learned a lot, had 2 babies, and then eventually I very slowly got going on my own as casting director. And I was very lucky because I just had a few lucky breaks really at the beginning, and before I knew it, I was working on a big old costume drama at the BBC, and that was Vanity Fair, which I did way back in I think it's 1998, I think. And it was the Vanity Fair that Natasha Little played Becky Sharp in. It's that one. Phil Glenister and Tom Ward and Nat Parker.
Let us know if
Mary
you're watching, you've
Margulies,
seen
David
that.
Bradley. And that was fantastic. And really, the only reason I got that job sort of fairly early on was because I'd worked with Mark Munden, who was the director, who had come from documentaries at that time, and we worked together on a kind of smallish Channel 4 piece of new writing, which was written by Jez Butterworth, fantastic writer. And so suddenly Mark got propelled into doing a big BBC series, and I was the only casting director who knew and had ever worked with, so I tagged along. So it kind of went from there, really. I don't think I ever necessarily planned to be, or would have thought I would be doing it for so long, to be honest. But it's a great job in that every project you do is a different challenge. You're working with a different team, different director, different producers. So you can never get bored. And it doesn't get any easier, I have to say, either. At the moment, when there is such a huge number of platforms, we're all competing for the leads all the time. I love doing a kind of whole range of things, really.
Yeah, sounds great. It's quite a nice journey as well. We're hearing that quite a lot from, I think, everyone across the lockdown period. Everyone's got different journey, different story into how they're working today.
I don't think this business is one where you very often have a very predictable journey. You just have to kind of slightly go with the flow, really. And then when you do get opportunities, obviously, work very hard and do it to the best of your ability and go from there. I mean, it took me a long time to really believe that, another job. I've always been freelance, and it took me a long time, probably about 10 years, really, to actually think, I think I'll probably be able to do another job after this one.
Have to write the book, Jill. Have to write the book. All the gossip in there.
Yeah.
So obviously that's your journey to being a casting director.
Yeah.
But for those who are watching who don't know what a casting director is, or a CD is, or whatever, or casting assistant, and all those terms that we may see credits for. Well, we do see credits for on TV shows and film. What exactly is it you do?
Well, it's a very collaborative job, but I suppose we are the researchers in a way. Directors and producers have so many other tasks they have to do in putting together a series, a film, whatever. They don't necessarily have the opportunity or the time to really get to know who is out there, the actors who are there. So it's partly just kind of making yourself aware of the actors that you can, the pool of actors that you can draw from. I suppose it's developing a kind of taste as well, and knowing how to put an ensemble together, to get the chemistry right, to find the essential essence of what an actor brings to a particular role. Having a really good memory, I would say, is probably what you need. But I mean, the actual nuts and bolts of it, normally it starts by somebody getting in touch and saying, would you be interested in doing this, and sending me a script? And that's where it starts, really. I'm always attracted to, I'm attracted to doing things that I would really, really want to watch. That's the major thing, I think. But I have kind of quite Catholic tastes, really, and I don't have particular things I'm looking for. And that the writing is good, and it's character-led. That's really important to me. I quite often read scripts which are, have an interesting concept, but the characters are functions of the plot rather than characters that I really think good actors would want to play and could really get their teeth into. Having a bit of a conversation to start with the director, producer, sometimes the writer, and then I go away and I, spend a lot of time, well, as much time as I have, which is sometimes not a lot of time, to be honest, kind of coming up with lists of suggestions, long lists, which I then kind of shorten. And I'm always a little bit suspicious of the first thoughts that I have. Sometimes they're the best ones and you can't improve on them, but very often it can be more interesting to, just think of actors who haven't been given the opportunity to be seen in a certain way or play that kind of role. Because sometimes your first ideas are because you're reminded of something a little bit too similar. And I like to kind of, not seem obvious in the way that I cast, or that to typecast, because that becomes a little predictable. So then we discuss. Sometimes you're talking about actors who have a CV, which means that they don't audition, that they're offered parts, and then we would decide on our wish list, and then through agents, obviously, make those offers and cross our fingers. Otherwise, we're doing days and days of auditions, and trying out. What I try and do is give directors, producers different ways of realizing a character, so I would try and kind of say, well, he could be, or she could be this or that. And it's very, very interesting, because you actually, working with the director, you actually sometimes really kind of discover the story you're telling, not the plot, but the way that the characters into play, or where they're realized is really to do with the most important things you want to say about the character and the story that you're telling. And when I'm thinking about who would be right for a part, I tend to think about some really significant scenes, probably one or two, maybe sometimes just one scene, which I think actually that will tell you so much about whether an actor is right for this or not. And then think about that actor and kind of play and imagine the scene in my imagination and see if it kind of fits. And then the other part of that's all the kind of nice, kind of imaginative side of the job. The other side of it is then we have to get into the nitty-gritty of sorting out the contracts, the negotiations, the billing, the dressing room, the travel, the per diems, all of that. So that's part of the casting director's job as well. The budget, all of that.
We always spoke to Debbie Williams.
Yeah, no, Debbie.
And she was saying the same thing about paperwork. Just paperwork everywhere.
Oh yeah,
builds up. Just all the little things you have to do. It's
yes. And as a casting assistant, the reason that you need a casting assistant, I never take on more work than that means that I can be in every single audition. Sorry, I think that's my computer.
Okay.
I can
might be your next job, just ringing up now, be like, oh, God, take this.
No, it's not. It's one of those, automatic Guardian masterclasses. I will always be there in the auditions, because I like to actually be there, because you learn a lot about what the director is looking for as well. Sometimes you're just trying to work out the options and then narrow it down, and it's so helpful to be able to have that discussion, ongoing discussion all the time. Sometimes actors, of course, are just not able to physically come to an audition. Well, nobody can at the moment, but in normal times. You ask actors to make little recordings themselves, self-tapes, or for their role, and send it in, and then we put it together. And there's a little bit of an art to choosing what audition pieces you do as well. I would normally give an actor 2 or 3 scenes, contrasting scenes really, which would show hopefully a lot of aspects of the character that you're looking for.
So, see, there's a lot more to it, I think, than people realise. When you think of casting director, you just think you pick an actor and that's kind of it. But there's so much more to it.
I remember trying to explain to my dad what I did when I first started doing this. I sort of helped choose actors, and it was kind of almost like, okay, so you do that in the morning, what do you do after lunch? But actually it's quite a long process. I mean, some directors that you work with are very actor literate, they know a lot of actors, so you can literally talk about this role. Well, we wouldn't get Andrew Scott to play this role, but it's kind of that kind of actor I'm looking for. Now that's kind of a helpful steer. And it also means that, you can talk through ideas and kind of cross people off the list and say, yeah, that's really what I fancy. But others, others just don't watch very much television and film. And that can be quite interesting as well, because then you're bringing actors in who, I have seen lots of work they've done before, but the director really doesn't know who the hell they are. But then it's just a kind of, do I see them in the role or not? And they're not confused, or kind of, there's no baggage, nothing which sways them or biases them in any way. So that can be interesting as well.
I think it's so much potential there, isn't it? Okay, we better move on, because we're getting people to start ask the questions as well. So you've not got to leave enough time for those. So hello to everybody who's watching. Do let us know where you're watching from. Hello to Cornwall College and the acting students there who are watching. Because you've drawn quite the crowd this evening, Jill. But let's talk about some of your work.
Oh, God. All right.
I know. We've got to talk about the work now. Sorry. We can't just talk about your job. We've got to talk about the work you do as well.
Yep.
So I want to start with something people may remember and is now available on Netflix, which is Merlin.
Is it on Netflix?
It's on Netflix now, yeah. You can catch it. So your work is still out there. And
well, I think I'm very fond of Merlin, and it was a job that I did when my kids were kind of the right age for it, when it started. I mean, they're in their 20s now, obviously, but that was fun, that I was doing something that they liked and watched over 5 years, actually, 5 series.
So we were talking about this earlier, and Jill actually cast every episode of Merlin, which IMDb said
directors cast every speaking role in anything you watch.
It's true, but I'm sure some of you must share projects, surely. It's like particularly those long-running ones.
There are teams of casting directors. Normally, not more than like 2 casting directors who work together. But no, I always have an assistant, and then if I'm working on something which requires children or teenagers, I have somebody who works with me who's brilliant at that kind of thing.
That makes sense. I think it's important to work in teams for those sorts of things, isn't it? So. But let's talk about Downton Abbey then as well, because you were there for a few series, or seasons, as they say.
Yeah, it was. Downton was 6 series. Yeah, 6 series. Yeah, and the plan originally was to do 3 series of Downton. Julian Fellowes' plan was to do 1 season, which was up to just before the First World War. The 2nd season was going to be going through the war and just after, and then the 3rd series, the final series, was going to be taking the family into the 20s. So you were starting at, I think it was 1912 it started, and it was going to go on to sort of 1920, 21, something like that. And it was going to show, a period of huge social change, with the war in the center of it. But I think by the beginning of series 2, it was pretty obvious that it was a bit of a success, and it was a big success in America as well. And so kind of having gone through the war as was planned, because the scripts were written for the Second World War, it was then like, okay, right, slow down. And then gradually instead of going through like 4 or 5 years in a series, it was like 1 year, almost, really. But I had said that I was really keen to do 3 series, and then I went and did other things, and then they came back to me and said, would you be so I didn't do series 4. So then they came back to me and said, would you be a consultant on series 5? And I thought, that's a weird, how do you consult in casting, because it's all about what's your taste, really, and judgment. And so I said, that would be really, really tricky. It might be better to do it all. And so they said, yeah, come back and do it all. So, and they told me it was going to be the final series as well. So they said, come back and do the final series. So I went back and did series 5. Then it wasn't the final series either. And so then I ended up doing series 6, which was the final series. And then I did the movie. So yes, that has been with me for, 10 years, I suppose.
So I'll be honest, I never really saw that many episodes of the series or the movie. So I will have to sit down and watch it now with a whole new light on the work that goes into it.
Yes, it's funny watching. I mean, I caught the beginning of the very, very first episode on ITV3 or something, I don't know, it came out, and gosh, they looked so young. Everybody looked so young.
That's quite funny on these long-running series that people do grow up and change over the years and age, and then you go, oh, actually, hold on a second, this is...
Well, it's unusual, but it's probably less unusual in America, but it's pretty unusual here to do something which lasts for 6 years, a series of 6 years.
I think it is quite unusual in the UK, isn't it, really?
Normally the kind of the limit. I mean, there are. I mean, look at Line of Duty and things like that.
Yeah, it keeps going, doesn't it? Yes. We're getting lots of questions for you as well now. A lot of people love Downton as well, particularly I think in the UK and stateside. There's something about it. It's kind of a great series people do enjoy watching. Let us know, I guess, who your favourite character is, maybe. So, I know, not you, Jill. It's like, I'm not going to ask you that. I won't ask you who your favourite character is. We don't want to get any actors watching this and going, what do you mean?
I love them all. They're like my children.
That's it. That's what you want to say. We love everybody here. So I know we've got a lot of Sanditon fans watching, I think, particularly from America, and we know there's a lot of hype around a possible series 2 or season 2.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, could you tell us a bit about what Sanditon is about and how it's an unusual storyline, really, isn't it?
Well, it's Andrew Davies took what existed of Jane Austen's novel Sanditon, which was 11 chapters. I mean, you can read it in an hour, I think, probably, and it just stops. It's a Jane Austen novel written by Jane Austen, and it just stops because at that point she was too ill to write, and she subsequently, quite shortly afterwards, died. And people have from time to time tried to continue the story, and that was the plan. And the plan was that it would be a hopefully 3 series, actually, but certainly 2 series. And the point where the novel finishes, Jane Austen has introduced you to pretty much all the central characters, and our hero Sidney Parker has literally just arrived and got off his horse, and that's it, end of story. So we don't really know what the story would have been. But it's unusual. It's obviously her last novel, and it's unusual because it's post the Napoleonic Wars. It's the Regency period, high Regency period, and it's set at the seaside. It's a kind of Lyme Regis kind of beginnings of a resort like that. So a lot of the central characters, instead of being landed gentry who've owned their, been born into this world of wealth, are entrepreneurs, self-made men who are attempting to make their way in the world from, you would say middle class, but not aristocratic backgrounds. And so our central character, one of our central characters, is trying to make a fashionable seaside resort. And also she introduces her only black character as well, who is an heiress from the West Indies, who's come to England to be the ward of our central male character, Sidney.
See, I think one episode of this and I had to do something else. I'm very bad. I'm sorry, everyone watching. I will catch up on all this TV. I do promise. But that must have been quite an interesting one then to cast, because I guess it's the first adaptation of it. So unlike Pride and Prejudice, there's no preconceived Colin Firth coming out of the lake concepts.
But obviously it's a Jane Austen. Andrew Davies knows his Jane Austen, and he did borrow from time to time, not characters, but character traits, certainly. So the challenge really, the most difficult challenge really, was that you had 2 central characters who were a sort of version, if you like, of Darcy and Elizabeth, in that they just don't get on to start with, and then gradually, of course, their real characters are revealed. Also, his real character is revealed.
No, so we don't want any spoilers on that front.
No, quite. The problem with it, if anybody hadn't watched Sanditon, it was that it was always planned to go for more than one series. So at the end of the first series, a huge obstacle has been put in the way of our hero and heroine getting together. And at that point, ITV unfortunately decided not to recommission the series. Now, I think that actually it would have done them. I think the series could have done very well if it hadn't been scheduled in the way it was scheduled, because it was scheduled bang slap up against Peaky Blinders.
Ooh.
I mean, as soon as I heard that that's the way they scheduled it, I thought, oh, no, that's a really, really bad idea, because Peaky Blinders, it's its fifth series, I think, fourth series, I can't remember, but massive following worldwide. Had been on Netflix, very cool show, a kind of a brand really. So very difficult to put a new series up against that, whatever ITV had put up, and it did seem to me a little unnecessary, really, that they did that. Anyway, then Sanditon was shown on PBS in America, and was very, very popular. I mean, it was very popular here with people who actually saw it. And since then, the fans of the show have done this amazing campaign to try and bring it back. And I mean, Amazon are seriously considering it at the moment. I have no inside track, I'm afraid. I only know that, as everybody does now, that Amazon is seriously considering co-funding a second series with PBS. But
Who knows?
the trouble is, you get to the point where it's entirely a business decision. Everybody loves it, everybody wants it, but it's a business decision, and it has to be regarded in that way by them. They're not doing it for artistic reasons if they do it, I think.
No, definitely. There's a lot of love there, and people definitely agreeing with your the Peaky Blinders clash in scheduling there.
As soon as I knew that was happening, my heart sank. And it is really depressing when that happens, because how much effort and work has gone into something, and for it to be scheduled like that, I just thought was very naive. And I think for some reason, what I heard was that the people who make these decisions at ITV had thought that Peaky Blinders would get the same kind of audience that it got on BBC Two, because it was the first time it had been shown on BBC One. It wasn't like a family show, but I mean, a bit crazy, really.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's understandable. It's the sort of thing that does happen. And of course, we're based in Poldark County in Cornwall. So we do have a bit of a similar, I guess, relationship with this period drama Seaside, although we're set a bit early. And we're talking to Joss, who directed, I think, 11 episodes next week, actually, about that. So for period drama fans, do tune in and we'll find out about a different period drama. Just keep a whole strand going. Before we move on to everyone's questions, and do keep sending those in, when we get to them, I'll try and ask as many as I can. I'm sorry if I have to paraphrase or change them slightly, but we want to make sure that we can ask as many as possible. But before we do, I want to talk about recent work Jill's done for Sky, Save Me.
Oh, yes.
Now, as we said earlier, this is a little bit different to something like Sanditon.
Yeah, now we've done two series of that. Actually, the first series is called Save Me, and the second series is called Save Me Too. TOO. Yes, it's Sky, so I don't know how many people will have actually been able to watch it. Written by Lenny James, who's brilliant in every way, a great guy, and he also plays the lead in it. And 6 episodes, and then we had a quite a long gap. That was always, Sky loved it and always wanted it to come back. The problem was that we had very specific dates that Lenny was available, because of course he does The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead in America. And then because he left The Walking Dead and then went to Fear the Walking Dead, then his whole schedule changed. And so we had about 18 months, I think, between the series. But great idea. I mean, a great hook for the series. I mean, this is very contemporary, set in working class South London. The idea that Lenny came up with is that he plays a character called Nelly, who's a kind of down on his luck, kind of charming rogue chancer, kind of minor criminal, kind of shambolic life, really. And he's suddenly arrested by the police, who tell him that he is abducted. He's charged with, suspected to have abducted his 13-year-old daughter. Now, this is a a girl he hasn't seen since she was 2 years old when he signed adoption papers. And the result of a short but very happy fling, nothing more kind of long term than that. And it turns out that the girl has disappeared, believing that she was going to meet her biological father, and has been, corresponding on email with somebody who has kind of lured her to somewhere. So the police aren't very good at getting into the kind of seamy side of London to find this girl, and Lenny's character kind of steps up in a way that, to sort of redeem himself as an absent father, really, to try and find her. And that's what you're then following over the 12 episodes. But in the midst of that, there's a great ensemble of characters who are mainly to be found at the local pub, the Palm Tree. So it's and it sounds a bit grim, but actually there's a lot of humor in it because of the nature of those characters, and they're really great, like three-dimensional working class characters. So it was for me, casting that, it was really all about authenticity, really, trying to find actors who you just did believe were those people.
Definitely. I think people can certainly go, without giving too much of the plot away, I think they can go see it on Sky or Now TV in the UK, and I'm guessing Sky probably in America, or online somewhere. It'll be out there, but
yeah, I think it's Sky.
Definitely Sky, we think. And being called, by the way, you've been called a legend in our comments.
Oh,
your work.
I'm that old.
You take the compliment from that one aspect. Questions are coming in thick and fast, Jill, so we better move on to the final part of our conversation. For those people who are watching, so two ways, I guess. If someone wants to become a casting director, how can they do it?
Right. Well, it's changed a lot. When I first decided I wanted to become a casting director, I think I wrote to 25 casting directors, because that was kind of covering the ground at the time. I'd always worked in theatres, and I was moving into working in film and television, and so I really needed to train. And now there are blooming hundreds of casting directors, I think. And there is also a guild, a casting directors guild, which is great, which is a great place for people to advertise when they need assistance. So I would say, despite the fact I said that, there's no actually correct way or predictable way of running your career, I think if you're going to be a casting director, the way to learn to do it is to work with an existing casting director as their assistant. Cool. And that could mean that you have to be fairly flexible, because a lot of casting directors work from project to project. But I think that's probably the way to do it. So investigate the Casting Directors Guild. I mean, obviously at the moment, nothing is happening. There's lots of talk about things getting up and running again. I was working on a film which is now meant to be filming again from the beginning of August, with quarantine, because it's filming abroad, with quarantining and bi-weekly testing and all that kind of thing, but it's very complicated. And that was about to film when we had to lock down. I'm working on something else, sort of early days of something else that might film in October. But at the moment, as far as the film and television industry is concerned, we're pretty much furloughed, I would say. So I think just at the moment, if you were looking for a job, it might be very, very challenging.
It's a good idea and a good time to research people, maybe. So people are looking.
People, exactly. So I think from a getting a job point of view, that's probably how I would do it. I mean, use IMDb, look on credits, see what people have been doing, make a list of people who are doing the kind of work that you think you would enjoy working on. And the other thing I would say, just for your own personal point of view, is just start making yourself actor literate, really. There's so many ways of watching things now and getting up to speed. on who's around, and just watch as much as you possibly can, really. Not only will you kind of, learn about actors, just in terms of who's who, but also you'll be learning about what you respond to, what you think is good casting, and clocking people and remembering.
So basically, Jill, your advice is to sit on the sofa and watch TV.
Yeah, it's a tough life.
They're tough. I mean, that's kind of it. And one final question for me at the moment. We obviously, there's a lot of student films that take place across the country and the world. And they often don't have the budget to cast or, get a casting director in or get someone in. Are there any sort of tips that you can give to those student or low budget films that can help make the casting process easier for both sides?
Well, actually, student films are something that I often suggest to young actors that they look out for, because it's a way of putting a show reel together. I mean, a short film of extracts of things you've done, because when you're putting a show reel together, it doesn't have to be something that's been broadcast, as long as it's broadcast quality, and that can be incredibly helpful for actors to have something that they can show work they've done. I mean, what I do when I'm looking for suggestions from agents, which I do on everything that I'm doing, is I send a breakdown out, and I send it out through Spotlight. But I mean, you could choose who you're going to target it to, and just email, to whoever you think might be able to provide actors. And it really is just, all I send them is a short, paragraph of what it is, a rough idea of what it's about, and then a list of the characters that I'm trying to cast, age brackets, 30 to 35, 18 to 25, whatever. And then anything that, is useful, specifically, useful to know, and an idea of the size of the role as well in relation to the other roles, leading role, or nice cameo or whatever. So they're just dates, what the financial recompense is, if there is any. Just be absolutely upfront about it, really. And then
information is key, isn't it?
All the information, dates obviously very important, location, and then you got all the information in one place, and then make it available to wherever you think you might target, your actors from.
And then you predominantly, I'm guessing, use Spotlight as your main platform.
Yeah.
For casting, that's one you use. Yeah. Marvelous. Okay, Jill. Whew, that's us done for the moment. Now for the questions from the public.
Oh, crikey.
I know. It's always quite fun, this, but I had to go through. So Louise has been looking after the questions today, and I'm just going to go through some now. So again, just bear with us, everybody. And I might have to summarize or change them a little bit, but hopefully everyone gets something answered. So the first one's from a headshot photographer.
Right.
Bit different, isn't it? Yeah. What advice do you have for people who want to get their headshots done and get them across your desk? So is there anything in particular that jumps out at you in a headshot, I guess?
Right. Normally I'm asked this question from actors saying, which headshot do you think is the best, or who do you recommend takes my headshot? I think actual physical photos don't come across people's desks really anymore.
Bit of a shame, surely. You want a nice envelope to open and go.
I used to be the case. I mean, there used to be a time when I would get literally a post office sack full of mail every day. Now it's all emails all the time. So rarely do I actually see hard copies of photographs, which is a shame, isn't it, really? I would say what makes a good photograph is something which doesn't have any particular attitude. I think it's just something that obviously is straightforward. You're always looking, I mean, when you're screen work, I have to talk about screen work really, it's all about people's eyes, isn't it? So something which is actually well lit, the right sort of dimensions, saying, looking at myself, head and shoulders, and something that actually looks like you as well. Was that the question? Or
yeah, I think that answers that one.
And I mean, if I was researching who to go to, if I was an actor, I would go through the Spotlight database and look at photographs and see who I thought rather
I think
good.
it has to reflect your personal style as well, as much as everyone else can. You've got to be happy with it, I think, as a
You've got to
performer.
be happy with it. You've got to feel it represents you, but it's got to, the worst thing in the world would be to have a photograph which people would, when you walked in the room, they'd be kind of double taking. You don't want that. So it's got to be, and relatively up to date as well, I think. Certainly something that's been taken within the last 5 years.
Well, my headshot's currently a bit strange with my lockdown hair.
Oh
So it's
God,
kind
tell
of,
me about it. Tell me about it.
You can't win, can you? So that's it. Hopefully that answers that question. So the next one's about chemistry, and that's not about science chemistry, I'm afraid.
Well.
So do you ever immediately see chemistry between characters or actors, particularly when it comes to Sanditon?
Well, we did do single auditions, and then we kind of mixed and match actors and put them together. I've often done that, and it always seems to me that just by sheer happenstance, you never end up in the audition room getting the right people together. And it's often because of availabilities or it's usually availabilities. I mean, if it's a part that you've really got to get the chemistry right, it's an important role. And those very actors are usually fitting in auditions and with other jobs they're doing and all that kind of thing, or they're in America or whatever. So I can genuinely say on Sanditon, I think we did audition Turlough and Crystal together. This will only mean anything to Sanditon.
Yeah, it's gone way over my head. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. But I think they were actually the only two actors who we ended up casting who we saw at the same time, and it wasn't deliberate at all. And quite a lot of the actors didn't actually go through that. Probably about 5 or 6 did. Other than that, I suppose I'm probably quite a good matchmaker, and it's not unusual for people to actually sometimes get together when I cast them.
It's a whole separate side on an app or something you have there for you.
On Sanditon, can I just say, but it's just a question of, can you visualize those two people together? And I can't remember, fortunately. No, probably somebody's going to email me or text me after this and say you're completely wrong. But I can't remember casting a couple romantically and some hating each other or not getting on or it not kind of working out. So I think it's just, you just have to kind of go on your instinct, really. I mean, if you can get people together to do a chemistry read, that's great, obviously.
Yeah, no, definitely. I hope you answers the question for those people who want to know that one. So one from a young actor, and I guess this kind of applies to some unknown actors as well. They're starting out college, moving to university. What is the best way to find out about castings, auditions for shows when they're starting out or unknown?
Well, it's having an agent. It really is. I mean, I'm afraid I wish I could say that, there was a simpler, proactive way for individuals to get the kind of information they'd want about casting. So much of it is about timing and being just, people either reminding you or presenting you or at the right moment. So it's a bit chicken and egg, I'm afraid. It doesn't help me saying, you've got to get an agent if you don't have the wherewithal to get an agent in the first place, because it's just, the law of diminishing returns. I realise that. But that's why it's very useful to try and get a show reel together or something of that sort. Casting directors send out breakdowns of the type that we were talking about to agents, and agents then send submissions in. I mean, I don't just go by agents' submissions. I always go through, I'm afraid I still use the Spotlight books for older actors, which aren't being even produced anymore since.
It was a shame when they stopped those. You actually got a physical book and you could see people's faces. It was great.
So hard for them to continue to do them, but now it's not the same looking on the Spotlight database. I really like being able to flick through the books, but anyway, I'm just very old. But that, I think, I'd send out to a lot of agents. I probably for normally, I would send out to nearly 200 agents. So it's not like you've got to be with, the top 6 agencies or something like that. And then I'd probably even send out to more if it was something very specific I needed, like I was working on a Scottish piece or a Manchester piece or whatever. I would add to that. So yeah, that's it. Because I don't think people realize how quickly we're working sometimes. I mean, one really good thing about this lockdown and everything stopping is that there's been time for writers and their teams to actually develop and write a lot of scripts. I mean, the series that I'm going to start doing quite soon, which should film in October, which is written by Joe Barton, who wrote the very brilliant Giri Hadji. By the time we go into pre-production properly, we'll have all 8 scripts. Now, that never happens. You can be working on a series with only 2 scripts to start with. And inevitably what happens is that, that kind of concertina thing happens. And you have very little time to cast sometimes. Even at the beginning of a production, probably the actual full-on pre-production period will only be about 8 weeks, something like that. And then if you take off a week's rehearsal or days in the last week before you start filming for rehearsal, the week before that, the director will probably be doing the technical recce, as it's called, where they go to all the locations and work out how they're going to film every scene so you don't have access to them. So, the time gets really quite short. So although it would be lovely to do, a million general auditions and things, it's just not possible. And so you constantly, you are working through agents an awful lot of the time.
No, that makes sense. I think, again, people can use this time to research agents, put work together, monologues and all those sorts of things if they want to create work, which I think is wonderful. And it's what we can do. I hope that answers that question. Right. Do you ever get to go to set and see the actors at work?
I do. I always go and do at least one set visit. Obviously, it's easier if they're filming in London, and so much of the time they're not. So, I always go and visit. I love seeing everybody. I always time it. It can be very boring, actually. Pre-production is all so busy and so quick. And then when you go and, for me, if I go watch, some filming done, I've got absolutely no function at all other than to stand around gossiping with the actors. So I usually organise it so I get there maybe an hour before lunchtime.
It's a good plan.
Have lunch, stay for the afternoon, and then disappear.
Do you never fancy dressing up on some of the period dramas and just getting in the background?
No, I have been offered the opportunity to be a featured extra, but I always think it's going to be very dull because I'm going to be trapped then, and also I'd be very embarrassed if anybody recognised me.
Fair enough. That's good to know. Bit of fun. Got a question about Merlin.
Oh.
I know. So let me just have a look at this. This is from Emma. Yeah. She really enjoyed it. These long questions, guys, are great, but I had to actually read them all. It's like, damn it.
You did.
So, did you find a different conception for each character, or was it something you developed when you started out? So I guess, was the character fully formed when you cast them, or did they get to develop it themselves?
Well, that's a really good question, because when you work on a series, obviously there are parameters for the characters, but once the actors are in place, of course the writers will write for whoever you cast. So the characters do develop in tandem with the actors who are playing them. So, and I think particularly on something like that, where the 4 leads really were young actors with very little experience at the time. They were pretty much out of drama school. So, they grew as actors, and I think Colin Morgan is a bit of a genius, I have to say, and always was. And but even though he still had to kind of find his feet, and then it was just possible to throw him any kind of storyline, there's that lovely kind of I don't know what the word is really, that kind of organic kind of where the actor and the character kind of become one, and the writers see what the actor's real strengths are, and then they can write for them.
That makes sense. And again, because particularly with Arthurian, so those who haven't seen Merlin, it is about King Arthur. They can obviously interlace all the stories that are going to go on with that and help create the
Yeah, but
characters that way.
you can also have fun with them as well, because you can kind of subvert the myth as well. I mean, if you haven't seen Merlin, the thing that was so clever about Merlin really was it's about the young Merlin arriving with, you know, magical gifts, but they're outlawed in Camelot, so he has to keep that very quiet. But Arthur, who starts off as a complete, I can't think of a polite word to say, you know, not the Arthur of myth, but a spoiled brat, really. And he's the same age as Merlin. So you've got these two young men who are growing up together, really. Yeah.
No, I think, well, there you go. That's Merlin. So you can go check that out on Netflix if you like. Okay, and back to Sanditon and Downton. Who was the first person to be cast on Downton?
Oh, good point. Who was the very, very first? Well, I know on the first day of castings, we saw Michelle Dockery and Dan Stevens. So I think they were probably pretty close to the first people we cast. Actually, probably it probably would have been Hugh Bonneville.
I had a feeling it might have been. I don't know why.
I think it was Hugh Bonneville, because Hugh didn't audition. We just offered him the role because obviously we knew him so well. So I have a feeling it was Hugh, but there was a bit of, I'm really interested, but I want to know who else is in it. So it was all, you know, that happened sort of, we thought we had Hugh, but he, you know, he wanted to know some more of the cast who were going to
teasing you there, teasing you.
Yeah.
And how about Sanditon?
With Maggie Smith, it was funny because I think in the early stages we thought, gosh, if we get Maggie Smith, then everybody would want to be in this. But Maggie is very wily, and she kind of waited and waited and waited. And said, I might. Who else is going to be in it? So actually, she was one of the later actors who actually genuinely committed. Yeah.
Something I think for actors there to work towards is that power they can get at some point in their career and go, do I want to be in this? Okay. How about Sanditon? Who was the first one for Sanditon?
Oh, now, who was the first person we cast in Sanditon? I think we put out a bunch of offers all at the same time. I think Charlotte Spencer was very early on, and Turlo Convery was early on, and Lily Sikorsky early on, and Crystal. I think all of those were kind of early on. We offered to Theo James right at the beginning. He was a little bit of a Maggie Smith in that he wanted to know who else was going to be in it before he committed. But and yeah, I mean, these ensembles are always a bit of a game to put together, really, because, you know, in a way, sometimes you have to wait till you cast one person till you know who matches them. So it's a bit of a jigsaw, which sort of you work your way out.
Gives you a challenge.
Yeah.
There you go. Are you casting the second Downton movie?
Well, if the second Downton movie happens and there are plans afoot, yes.
Cool. Well, it's a nice short one. Okay. Ooh, so I guess these are slightly gossipy ones, but not quite. Have you ever had an actor who did not like the role you gave them? So has someone like been cast in something, accepted it, and then gone, no, I don't like this role in any way?
No, that's not happened. I think there are actors who, you know, on series, for instance, Downton's a good example, really. The original cast signed up for 3 series, and then everybody wanted, you know, folk to stay on beyond that, and Dan Stevens and Jessica Brown Finlay didn't want to carry on, and I think, you know, that was like a dagger to the heart for all of us at the time. So there are actors who understandably, you know, want to go on and do different things, don't want to stay with their characters, but I can't think of anybody who actually had a kind of a bit of a moody after they were cast.
Okay, on the reverse of that then, these two questions follow each other. It's great. Yeah. Has anyone badgered you for a role?
I get badgered a lot by agents.
Yeah.
I can't really remember an actor badgering me personally, but I imagine they were badgering their agents who were then badgering me.
Yeah, it's that continual badgering somewhere along the line.
The badgering goes on. Yes.
Yeah, that's what happens, really, isn't it? I think as people go, and it's part of the business, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right. Oh wow, this still coming. The questions. It's amazing. This is great. I hope you're enjoying this, Jill.
Yeah. Go on.
Keep them coming. Right. Where's the next one? What's the hardest part about being a casting director?
For me, the hardest part is I've probably made it sound like it's all lovely because you sit in the casting room with your director and your producer and you decide who you want and that's it, decision made. It's not like that. It can be really corporate, and that decisions are made particularly, sometimes ridiculously far down the cast list. You have to get approval to offer, but there are sometimes up to as many as 5, 6 exec producers, once you've got co-productions, and you have to run all your decisions by them and get that exec producers aren't really in a position where they can force actors on an unwilling director, but they can certainly veto people, and that sometimes does happen, and that can be kind of infuriating if you're me, because sometimes you're in a position to be able to have a dialogue with an exec producer, but very often it's going through your producer, and so you're just handed these decisions for ridiculous reasons occasionally.
Well, that's the industry for you there.
I remember when I was a casting assistant, at the beginning of the time I was a casting assistant, we didn't even, I'm sure it was different in America, but in the UK, we didn't even film auditions. Actors would come in and read, but there was no filming done. And I can remember lovely Tim Piggott-Smith, who was just a delightful man. I remember when he came in to meet us for North and South, a long time ago, and I think actors of that age were unused to being filmed in auditions. So he came in to read, but said, "Oh no, I really would hate it if you filmed me." So we just didn't, it's fine. But that meant, before the whole, modern era when we've filmed auditions all the time, that meant that actually if you weren't in the room, you didn't really have anything to base a judgment on. And so the whole exec producer thing didn't really happen in the same way. Exec producer, I would be hard pressed to tell you who the exec producers were on some of the first things that I did. They were very much at a distance,
I did have visions of you having an office full of videotapes, though, just like walls lined with them.
God, putting videotapes together originally before the whole, your websites and things. It's so easy now.
What drew you to Sanditon?
Well, I'd worked with Red Planet before because I did Dickensian with them, which was...
So Red Planet's the production company, yeah?
Red Planet, the production company, made it, and I got on very well with Belinda Campbell and Tony Jordan. Oh, and then I worked for them again, actually. I did a biopic about Barbara Windsor to coincide with her 80th birthday, I think, and called Babs. So I'd worked with them before and they knew me. And then a year before we worked on Sanditon, Belinda sent me the first, I think it was either the first episode or the first 2 episodes. And I really liked the scripts. I really liked the idea that it was a Jane Austen and you didn't know what was going to happen next, because I know all the Jane Austen novels so well that there is a slight, now for me, because I've seen so many adaptations of them, there is a slight kind of predictability. I know what's going to happen. I still enjoy them, but the thought of a Jane Austen where you genuinely didn't know what was going to happen next was very enticing.
Well, there you go, everybody. That's what drew Jill there. Do you ever use existing connections between actors? I do have an example, if you'd like an example.
Yeah, tell me what you mean.
I have an example. I have a between Andrew Lee Potts and Hannah Spirit.
Yes, cast them in Primeval, yeah.
But did they have an existing connection beforehand?
No, that was one of my matchmaking efforts.
There we go. See, Jill's been matchmaking for years here, people. So If you do need to hire her for a film, she also offers additional services like that for your cast.
Yeah, they don't always last.
So you're going to have maybe one of these reality TV shows that they get out there. Celebs Go Dating. You could be on that in some way as a consultant.
Yes. Existing. Well, I did on Sanditon actually. Sorry, we keep on going to Sanditon. But Theo's lovely wife, Ruth. I mean, I knew her as an actress, and we just thought it might be fun for her to play the evil, third party who comes in and breaks them up. Really.
Just stirring there, Jill, stirring the pot.
No,
what film or TV show would you like to be involved in? Is there sort of a dream project that genre-wise maybe, or stylistically, or director, or?
I don't let myself think about that really, because then I would get disappointed when I can get it. I think the only job that I can remember, because I have an agent as well, I rang up my agent and said, can you see if they've got somebody lined up to do that, because I'd love to do it. And it was Wolf Hall, and Nina Gold was doing it, and she'd been on board forever, I think. But that I remember thinking, because I'd read the book, both the books, and rather loved them. But I can't remember. There's nothing particularly that I hanker after, really.
Fair enough. I mean, maybe there's something out there that'll get you and go, ooh.
Wait and see what comes.
Okay, we've got one from an actor. Self-tape or Skype audition, I guess, / Zoom. In this day and age.
I have not so far. I'm sure it will happen, and probably quite soon. So far, I've not done a Skype audition that was anything more than just a chat with me and the director. I've not done an actual reading with somebody on Skype or Zoom. What was the other alternative?
So I guess, or self-tapes. So I guess we're moving towards a self-tape.
Done lots of self-tapes. I mean, I know self-tapes are coming in, and people now are sometimes using self-tapes as like a first round. Everybody self-tapes. I'm not a fan of that. I like, where possible, to actually meet actors, because you can kind of help them and guide them. And I'm fortunate in that I've worked with directors who like actors and who like to work with them in auditions. So I would always give actors the opportunity to do that where possible. But self-tapes, obviously, self-tapes are the other alternative. And I think that's probably what is going to be happening a lot until we're in a situation where everybody feels comfortable about, getting on the tube, getting on the bus, going into central London, sitting in a small room together. When will that be?
When will that? Well, that's exactly. I think there's going to be a huge change to the industry, particularly for us out in the regions as well. It's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah. So yes. There's quite an art to putting a good self-tape together there. And if you are, quite apart from just getting the lighting and the proportions and everything right, if you're uncertain about how you should play a scene, then it's not a bad idea to put more than one version down, I think. But make sure that they do seem,
Yeah, they're different enough. It's worth. It's not just worth changing a few keywords. And go, your intention needs to be different. I think in each take.
Yeah, I think the personality would have to be different if you do that. But just try and get some feedback from the casting director before you do it as well. If you have. If you're confused or you want.
Yeah, I think it's communication information, isn't it? If it's justifiable question, people will happily answer it.
Of course, yeah.
I think this is Sanditon related. Was there a conscious decision to cast an American as Cora Crawley?
Yes.
Yes, there was. Okay, I've no idea who she is.
That's Downton.
I need to learn about all these characters.
Oh yes, no, absolutely. She was written as an American character. Julian Fellowes was very interested in that period of time where Americans, moneyed Americans, married slightly hard up English aristocrats. It happened a fair bit. And there's a whole different kind of culture coming into a British high society. So Cora was always American, yeah.
There you go. See, I need to. I'm basically having an excuse to go watch loads of period dramas now. This is what I'm taking from this interview. So we're coming towards the end now, Jill. I'll be pleased to hear. But was there a role that you cast that you thought, I've made it as a casting director?
Not
or a project, maybe then.
I suppose. I suppose way back. I suppose Vanity Fair was a big show which came at me rather suddenly, probably a little bit too soon, really. But the great thing about it was that it was at the time, I mean, it's 20 years ago now, Mark Munden is a brilliant director, and he's a kind of an auteur, I would say, rather than a normal telly director. So the version that he put together of Vanity Fair, and I don't often say go and watch something I've done, but actually I do say go and watch that one if you can get hold of it, because it's very interesting to watch it now, because it was quite groundbreaking at the time. It was an Andrew Davis adaptation, and Mark was quite bold with Andrew's adaptation. I mean, if he could do something visually that didn't require a page of script, it was like, edit it out, you know. I think Andrew was a bit taken aback sometimes. And also Murray Gold did the music, and it was very eclectic music, which we're very used to now in period drama, but weren't at the time. And it was a massive cast. I mean, it was a cast of, I don't know, probably somewhere between 80 and 100 characters. But the great thing about it was that it was near the end of a particular regime at the BBC. And for some reason, we were just given a lot of artistic freedom. And it was a British and American co-production. They said they wanted a couple of actors who meant something to an American audience. And for some reason, at the time, they decided that David Bradley as Miriam Margolyes ticked the box. So after that, it was like, have anybody you like. which is amazing, really. So yeah, and it just was one of those period dramas, because it was Thackeray, it wasn't Jane Austen, it wasn't proper, it was a little bit kind of hyper real, a bit cartoony sometimes. So I was able to drag in actors that I'd loved and watched in the theatre for years, and actors like Anton Lesser, who hadn't really done very much on screen at the time, and comedians like Felix Dexter and people like that. So it was quite a distinctive cast, and I was kind of quite surprised how well it went, really. I mean, I remember there was one day where I went and had a cry in the blues at BBC Centre House, because I thought this is just too much. It's really kind of stood the test of time, I think, and it's very distinctive. So that, I think, I was kind of proud of. I think I was pretty proud of North and South, for making Richard Armitage a sex symbol, and also the Canterbury Tales, which was another big old kind of anthology series that was fast and furious, and that I was very pleased. I'm just thinking kind of way back, really.
No, I think it's great to send people to watch stuff that's not on now.
It's easier to think about things in the long ago rather than more recently, really. You can sort of, if they've stayed with you for that time, then, they've really meant something. But also, I mean, I did that all period things, but I did Fish Tank with Andrea Arnold was an amazing experience. I loved doing that. And also I did a film with Antonia Bird called The Hamburg Cell, which was quite an interesting piece to do, because it was about the 9/11 hijackers, and we did it only a couple of years after 9/11. And that was quite challenging, because it all had to be cast here. It was very low budget, and it was finding people who were, could play all those characters with the right ethnicity. And that worked out, I think, pretty well. So I suppose, it wasn't. There's never a particular moment, but I suppose when I look back, I'm pleased to have done those.
Find those projects, and I'm aware of time, Jill. But do you have time for a few more questions?
What time is it?
I don't know. We've been going. It's
Oh,
10
yeah,
past 7.
I have. Yes, I have.
Oh, well, people will be happy to hear that. I thought I'd better
No, it's
ask.
just that, you know, I promised that I would be available for dinner at 7:30, but it's
Oh,
not.
well, okay. Well, you've told us that now. That's a problem. Oh, all that extra time. So
Well,
we've got a few from some
leave at
actors.
25 past. Yes,
Run
yes.
away. We'll keep this as quick as we can. A couple from actors.
Yeah.
Do you ever cast unknowns?
Yes.
Okay,
Answer.
we'll move on to the
Well,
next question because it kind of follows on a little bit.
Hmm.
People based outside of London.
Yes. Now, I'm always very happy to cast people outside of London. The annoying thing is, and this I think is very annoying for people who live outside of London, for some reason, production companies, if they're doing a London-based shoot, they always imagine that they're able to say to people, you've got to be London-based, you've got to provide a London base. Whereas if they're filming anywhere else, if they're filming in Manchester, they never expect people to have Manchester bases. I mean, I might be asked to find people who are local for some of the small roles, but yeah, so it's from a purely, you know, cost point of view, I think it's very unfair, really. And increasingly, I remember when I did Dickensian, which is a big old ensemble cast, and we filmed it in London. And I remember saying, this is a few years ago now, I remember saying, it'll be great if we film in London because it's a long shoot and people, you know, will feel more comfortable about being closer to home. And then, of course, you start to cast it. And there were the young cast who were, you know, quite successful young cast, was still kind of sharing flats and living in London. And then the Pauline Collinses of this world had lived in London all their lives and had their massive big houses next to Hampstead Heath. But there's a whole kind of range of actors in the middle, you know, the Adrian Rawlinses, the Richard Corderies, people like that, who had to find people they could stay with in London, you know. So, yeah, it's, yes is the answer. But unfortunately, you have to find a nice friend who lives in London that you can stay with and provide a base when you're filming in London at the moment still.
Oh, well, hopefully. I mean, obviously, some people will be asking that. There's a lot of periods that does shoot in the southwest, so from Bristol, well,
Yes.
Bristol down.
A lot happening in Bristol, yeah.
So hopefully, you know, we'll see more regional casting or accessibility for performers, particularly if they're new or established.
Yeah, well, I can't see budgets getting any more extravagant in the near future.
No.
So, you know, more and more there will be companies who are looking for local people who are based local to the shoot.
Yeah. We'll start to round up now. So one from a young actor. Is there anything that he shouldn't do, or you don't, sort of anything that pet peeves, I suppose, for particularly young actors coming into you or getting in touch with you? Or
well, sorry, I'm just going to, I feel like I'm getting a bit dark. Is that better?
Yeah, I thought you were just going to put a big book out and go, here's my book you can buy and read this, and it will tell you everything.
No, I should write it. Pet peeves. I think the thing is that it's not so much about how people contact me. I mean, please don't expect to get an answer from me because I just get far too many unsolicited emails, but I always read them. So I don't mind people contacting me. If you come to an audition with me, the thing that would peeve me is if you weren't prepared, really, I suppose. And that really, I think, does mean pretty much knowing your lines, because, you know, keeping eye contact is so important, because not only for the person who's reading with you and the people who are in the audition, but for the, you know, for the producers and the exec producers who then watch auditions afterwards. If they can't see into your eyes, then they can't read what you're doing. So I think, you know, I've had silly situations, not very often, but very, you know, daft situations when actors have gone to a great deal of trouble to come to London to audition and been on a train for maybe 2 or 3 hours and don't really know their lines. And I kind of think, what were you doing on the journey? You know, it just seems pretty obvious. And I think there used to be this theory that, you know, you don't want to be too grooved before you come into an audition. And you're like, well, yeah, you've got to be able to take direction, but I just think you should be, you know, kind of prepared, really. It's very important. You're just not doing yourself any favors. You're not doing yourself justice otherwise. So that would be a peeve for me.
No, that makes sense. And I think that's, you know, a good bit of advice as well to bring things to a close on there, Jill. So all the actors can get that. Thank you, Jill, for your time this evening. It's been great speaking to you. Thank you, everybody, for watching, no matter where you are in the world. And we do hope you've enjoyed. Do let us know if you haven't already, which was your favorite part, where you're watching from. And we hope we've covered everyone's questions in some way, one way or another. And I guess we should give a big shout out to the Sanditon fans and say,
yeah,
let us know how you get on with that, maybe,
I have
everybody.
to say that I've never known a campaign like it, and they've done an amazing job. And Amazon, I think, are in contact with them now. So yes, keep retweeting.
That's it. I think keep pushing. We have retweeted. Yeah. We'll get behind that one. If you enjoyed this evening's one, though, do come back next Wednesday at 6 p.m. for our interview with Joss, who's been, and Louise is ahead of me. Louise has put it up on the comments. So he's directed things like Mr. Selfridge, another period drama, Poldark, Law and Order, also a lot of kids shows, Sarah Jane's Adventures of all things as well. So we'll be talking about lots of different things there. But Jill, once again, thank you. I've got to put this back up on the screen. There we go. And I need to say thank you, Jill. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. And I'll see you all soon. So we turn Jill off. Stop Jill. And we just see, thank you, everybody. And have a lovely weekend wherever you are in the world.